We'll be kicking off our scouting reports as we look into a couple of different players that might fit what Miami is looking for are the 27th pick in the NBA draft. We'll look at some guards that could possibly ignite Miami's offense in the future. We're starting our blue notebooks today here on Locked On Heat.
That's what I'm doing. I'm taking 10 blue notebooks with me to Malibu with my wife. Blue notebooks. Blue notebooks. Blue notebooks. 10 blue notebooks to Malibu. Blue notebooks. Blue notebooks. Blue notebooks. 10 blue notebooks to Malibu.
My life.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Wednesday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However, you may be listening or watching on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. I am David Ramil, and with me, as always, the creative genius behind that opening segment, Wes Goldberg. If a little background here, a couple of years ago, following the 2018-19 season, Pat Riley addressed media, as he always does at the end of the season, and talked about going off to Malibu, as you heard from the intro, with 10 blue notebooks and telling the coaching staff to go and take blue notebooks, like the kind that you have in college, I guess, back when people used to take tests in these blue notebooks, and going and writing down notes on how to approach the draft, how to approach the offseason, et cetera, that he wanted to mine these kind of creative ideas. And so we took from that and we incorporated blue notebook scouting reports based on college players that we thought were going to be able to help Miami back in 2019. Of course, the Miami Heat wound up selecting Tyler Herro, and the rest is history. So we'll be repeating that process over the next week or so, looking at some great players from all different positions: guards, wings, ball handlers, bigs, etc. Somebody that could help Miami at 27.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. I love getting into the scouting process, and because the Heat went so far in the postseason, it was very delayed. And so we're kind of crunching all of this scouting, all of this blue notebook book work into a couple of weeks here. And of course, the NBA finals are still happening. You and I have locked NBA duties for the national show too, so we're kind of crunching all of this into a little bit. And of course, the draft is next Thursday, so it's a little stressful to try to get at all the players that could get there at 27, because the other thing too is the last time we did the Blue Notebook series, the Heat were picking in the lottery, and it's a little bit easier to figure out who might be there when you're picking, in that kind of range. When you're picking at 27, you have no idea how the draft is going to fall and who might end up there. So we're going to go through some dream targets. We've got some more realistic targets. We've got some sleepers that we'll get to over the next few days. So we're really excited to dig into this stuff. And because we get really in depth with this.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, we talk about pros, cons. We kind of weigh their impact over their collegiate career. In some cases, players that went to the G League, as I'll be talking about one in particular later on. And then we also talk about their upside scale, whether or not they'll be projected to be a rotation player, a potential all-star, things of that sort, and then how they specifically fit in Miami. What's the process for the Miami Heat to wind up selecting this player? So we'll kick that off. I think you've got one player in particular that we're both particularly excited about.
Yeah, I'm going to start this off with Kennedy Chandler, the point guard out of Tennessee. And I think a lot of Heat fans might be surprised by this, that we're starting with Kennedy Chandler. But a shout out to Kevin O'Connor at The Ringer. He had Kennedy Chandler falling to 27, falling to the Heat in his latest mock draft. And until I saw it on his mock draft, I didn't really think about Kennedy Chandler. Number one, I didn't really think about him as an end of the first round type of prospect. He's a guy who is mostly projected in the middle of the first round, but ESPN has him ranked 19th on their big board. It's not out of the question that he could fall to 27, right? It's a pretty fluid draft. And when you talk to people who really know this draft, scouts, people who do this with big boards and things like that, they basically say like the second half of this draft, once you kind of get outside the top 15 or so, is really, really fluid. Like whoever you pick at 27 could easily be picked at 16. Like it's really going to be based sort of the eye of the beholder type of thing. And so, no, not out of the question that somebody like Kennedy Chandler could fall. He was a top 10 prospect coming out of high school, the number one point guard in the country coming out of high school. So there's a lot to like as far as, the pedigree there. Look, the elevator pitch on Kennedy Chandler. An undersized guard, good athlete, tries really hard on defense. but is, more of that kind of traditional point guard playmaker type. He's 6 foot, 172 pounds. He's got a 6'5" wingspan. So he's small. He's really, really small. But he's got a really tight handle. And he works hard. He works hard on everything. He can play off the ball. He's in constant motion off the ball on offense, cutting, coming off screens and things like that. He's really willing to give up the ball, relocate, get the ball back. The way that he played at Tennessee, you could like with all the motion and stuff, you could really see him playing on a team like Miami that prioritizes and values that kind of thing. And then defensively, yeah, the size is an issue, but he doesn't like give up on that end. He tries really hard. He's fighting over screens. He's trying to get through them. He's on point with his rotations, at least at the college level. And my kind of, if I want to sum up Kennedy Chandler, you watch him, David, he just feels like a Heat kind of guy. All right.
Mm.
The bigger question is, do the Heat want a player like him? But he feels like a Heat kind of guy.
So a couple of things from what you're telling us here. One is the reason why he's slipping in drafts, as far as you know, because he's somewhat undersized at 5'11", 6 feet.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely the biggest knock on him.
Okay, so it's his size, his concerns as to whether or not he can handle the physicality of the NBA, etc.
Yeah, I mean when you're talking about even a guy like Ja Morant, like
Mhm.
Ja Morant is big compared to this guy, and he's a freak athlete, right? And so big, like a slightly bigger freak athlete, Ja Morant, like he's doing a lot of things despite his size, right? Steph
Yeah,
Curry,
I saw
otherworldly
some.
shooter, Trae Young,
Yeah.
NBA skills right away. With Kenny Chandler, yeah, the size is there, and he's like
Mhm.
not knocking down threes at an elite clip the way that Steph was at Davidson, or putting up huge numbers the way that Trae Young did at Oklahoma.
Right. You mentioned he's more along the lines of a traditional point guard, but he's a good balance of also looking for his shot and making plays for others, right? As far as his numbers overall are concerned.
Yeah, I mean, look, he kind of reminds me of the Trey Mann of this draft, and he was coming out last year. A lot of
Mm.
people were split on Trey Mann. Oklahoma City ends up taking him in the middle of the first round, which was higher than I think a lot of people thought he would go. But then he had a nice showing for OKC this year, and I think they're really high on him. But you look at Kennedy Chandler's stats last year: 14 points a game on 46% shooting, 38% from three,
Hmm.
and 4.7 assists. He's got some rebounds. He averaged more than 2 steals a game. So he's able to he gets his shots, but he's not putting up like 20 shots a game, 15 shots a game. He's putting up less than 12 shots per game, and his efficiencies are really good. But I'll go back, like his handle is so advanced already. Like if you're looking for an NBA ready skill right away, and this is one of the reasons I like Kennedy Chandler.
Yeah.
If you remember in our like 2 years ago, we talked about Kobe White. I wasn't a big Kobe White guy because I just questioned
Long
his
hands.
handle,
Right.
small hands, and I questioned his handle. I really think Kennedy Chandler's handle is elite right now, like NBA ready elite right now. The
Yeah.
way that he's able to get defenders on his hips coming off of picks, he hugs
Yep.
those picks coming off of them
Yep.
really well. He's using as much of the floor as he can. And then he's got a nice little float game that he gets to. And he's actually, like, despite the size, he was a really good finisher in his one
Yeah.
year at Tennessee.
Yeah.
The metrics and then the eye test too. Like he's got a variety of moves. He uses the basket as a defender really well to get
Yeah.
the real defender out of his way. He's just really, really crafty.
I saw some nice finishes at the rim. Able to dunk, actually, despite his size.
Yes.
High off the glass, high arcing shots on floaters and things of that sort. So, pretty high IQ, I'd say, just basic it on some of these
Very.
highlights. And I know it's hard to get the bigger picture, but I like his navigation, as you said, his ability to use screens effectively in today's NBA. Obviously, as the bread and butter for most generic offenses, he's going to be able to get to his spots. And he is a three-level scorer, a guy who can get to the rim, who can shoot to mid-range, and occasionally does spot up from three, too. So I think that kind of versatility in his offensive game, as we've seen with Tyler Herro, bodes well for his ability to
Yeah.
translate to the NBA, at least as a scorer. Defensively, that's, I guess, the big
Well, wait,
question then about whether or not.
you mentioned that he can dunk. His 41.5-inch max vertical leap was tops at the NBA draft combine. Okay. He was also among the quickest athletes tested at the combine as far as agility
For
and,
sure.
and acceleration. You watch him, his start and stop game is
Yeah.
also elite. Like his acceleration from a stopped position or a slowed position is, again, already NBA elite level. So I keep using this word, but it's an accurate one. He's very crafty. He's got that tight handle. He's got great footwork, all the things that we're talking about, and he's a good enough athlete where he could still dunk despite the fact that he's barely 6 feet tall.
Right. And I think when you're looking at a player as far as what makes it in the NBA, craftiness is a far better barometer, I think, of somebody who can figure out their role in the NBA than athleticism. We've seen plenty of freak athletes that can't do anything and they can't figure out what they want to be in the NBA. I'd rather have a crafty player 10 out of 10 times. I mean, it's not like Alex Caruso is a bad athlete or anything by any stretch of the imagination, but his understanding of what he can do defensively, and he's got that great line about guys wanting to come into the NBA and be the CEO when they're really being asked to be the janitor, that kind of thing. Like, this is, when you look at the draft, keep that in mind. Like, guys have to understand that they're not going to be superstars right away. They're not going to put up 25 points per game, etc. But he's a guy who can come in and fill a need on a team. We'll talk about whether or not he can potentially fill that need with the Miami Heat. But before we do that, we'll also be talking about another player that I'll be scouting ahead in the next segment. And just a reminder that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, daily fantasy made easy. And easy is really what they're all about. As fantasy props and pick'ems get more popular, PrizePicks is making it easy for you to play. They do that with the best NBA DFS prop game on the market, offering more NBA props than any other DFS prop operator. PrizePicks offers any prop you can think of, from points scored to rebounds and even steals. And check out the PrizePicks Power Play. Here's how it works. You predict the over-under in a player's fantasy production, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry, and it's just you versus the projected fantasy totals. For a limited time, PrizePicks is an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for all of our users. They get $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point, but you must use the code NBA. That's right. It's an exclusive offer available to Locked On fans. If you sign up today, use the code NBA, $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores even a single point. Do it all using the award-winning app on the Apple App Store or on Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, and it's that easy. Plus, PrizePicks offers safe and fast withdrawals, so don't hesitate. Check out PrizePicks.com and use the promo code NBA, or go to your app store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. The Ultimate NBA Mock Draft starts June 16th with over 50 insiders. Nothing equals the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft. Locked On draft experts plus the Odyssey insiders. The first pick is June 16th, so search Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and follow now so you don't miss a pick. That's what we're all about here on the Locked On Network. Look, the finals is wrapping up soon. Miami season is unfortunately in the rearview mirror, as we talked about several players on the roster in our exit interview series. Now we're kicking off the future of the Miami Heat, at least possibly, in our blue notebook exercise here that we're doing. And I'll be talking about a player called Jaden Hardy, an interesting player, one that is all over the board on different big boards across the country. He's 6'4", sometimes listed as 6'5", so it's a little peculiar. About a 6'10" wingspan, sometimes a 6'9" wingspan. So it depends on your measurables there. I didn't see the actual combine numbers there as to whether they've got him listed, but let's say he's about 6'4", 6'5", with a 6'10" wingspan, about 190 pounds, just shy of his 20th birthday. He turns 20th on July 5th, so by the time he gets drafted by somebody, he'll be turning 20 or so. But he's anywhere on those big boards from high teens to the low 30s. So about low as 30, I think is as what I saw. So another player that just projects to be, again, not quite a lottery pick. There are questions about his consistency. There are questions about his size and ability to translate that to the NBA. But what he really seems is just like a really high impact scorer. The problem with him was that, again, he went into the G League Ignite. So no collegiate career. That kind of turns people off. Of course, we saw, Kuminga from the Golden State Warriors go that route. Jalen Green, of course, went to the Ignite and then got drafted by the Houston Rockets. So we've seen players go that route before. We think it's the future, basically. It's one of another outlet that it's going to be available to players coming out of high school that they don't necessarily want to go that route, or if they just aren't happy with their collegiate careers, want to be able to make a little money. The G League Ignite certainly provides that opportunity for them. So that's what Jaden Hardy did. And he went straight from being... Go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry. One point on the G League Ignite thing. You mentioned the inconsistency with Hardy there. That was the same knock against Jalen Green. It was the same knock against Jonathan Kuminga. So I don't know if it's just a function of these players playing for the G League Ignite program, going up against sometimes NBA caliber players in the
NBA,
G League, because that's who they play, is other G Leaguers. So it's still kind of fringe NBA guys. And so I don't up in the air. It depends on who you ask. Like if what the
yeah,
competition level is versus the college basketball. Like if you're playing the ACC, it's probably pretty close. Like there's no Paolo Bancheros and Jabari Smiths playing in the G League, but
yeah.
they're also there's just walk-ons on those teams too. So it just seems to be like a thing with the G League Ignite program is like there's just a lot of inconsistency there, and maybe that's just a function of doing that, trying to play professionally as opposed to collegiately. Collegiately
No
is much
doubt.
more of an AAU style kind of feel,
Yeah,
lifestyle versus
yeah.
that. So just something that's there. But
No,
Hardy's really interesting, and I think if I can ask you a question really quick on him is
yeah.
like, what do you think the comp is for him? I think that's a good place to start for a Jaden Hardy because, like you said, he's a score first kind of guy, but there's a lot of different versions of that kind of player.
Yeah, it's tough to really say because I've seen comps all over the place. Bradley Beal is one that I've seen. I think the Ringer actually made the Beal comp. I saw Dion Waiters too from Kevin O'Connor at the Ringer. I don't necessarily like that because I don't think he has that same explosive step that Dion did, and certainly Dion a little more stocky at his size and not quite 6'4" either. Anthony Simon's another one from the Portland Trailblazers. Honestly, and I know it's not necessarily the same tools physically or the same size or whatever, but his scoring, his slow pace, he never gets rattled. And to me, what I saw when I was watching him, it's Tyler Herro. I
Huh.
saw a lot of the scouting reports, and what I could see is that he's just a bucket getter. And who does that remind you of? And that's basically his biggest pro. Like as the positive things about his game is that he just has that scoring touch, and he has all the physical tools. Again, longer wingspan, so we don't have to worry about Tyler's alligator arms or anything like that. Not that it, obviously it's been a problem for Tyler
Sure,
at this
sure.
level. I'd say that Hardy has a little bit more of that physicality, a little bit more explosiveness, but not elite either. He doesn't jump off the ground. He doesn't explode with athleticism, but he never gets. He's always at his pace. And you made that point about Herro too. It's like he just doesn't seem to lose balance. He always knows what he wants to do, and whether the shot falls or not, he's going to continue to look for it because that's just the nature of his game. And that's something that's held against a lot of prospects. But given the nature of the G League, you're trying to show out. You're trying to do what you can to put up those points, and you're also contributing on defense whenever possible. But for the most part, it's not really the
Yeah.
focus of your game. That's also being held against Hardy. So that's one of the cons of his game is that he's not necessarily a strong defender, but he has all the tools. I honestly don't think that it matters. Like, I don't think he realized how important it is or that he had to care about defense in order for it to show out to scouts and people looking at him and stuff like that. Because
Yeah.
you're in the G League, you're just trying to put up points at a high level. And I think that's what it is. And to the inconsistency point, he started off really bad, not necessarily 0 for 10, but like 3 for 17 or that kind of stuff like that, like really shaky,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
necessarily finding a shot. By the end of the season, he was knocking down 20 plus points per game. Like he really found his strike and it wound up evening out. Think about like Duncan's past season, Duncan Robinson. A guy who started off badly, then started hitting over 40% for large portions of the season, and eventually the final numbers don't look good. Like Hardy only shot 27% from three, but he shot 40% or better in like 10
Well,
straight games, I think, later on
so
in the season.
that's why I was going to ask you. The field goal percentages are really bad for him. I mean,
Yep.
27% from three is the least of my concerns. Like
Yeah.
35% overall is my
Mm-hmm.
concern. But that's because the beginning was much uglier than,
Shaky.
and he got better.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good
Yeah.
sign. Like you like to see that out of collegiate prospects too. Is like if
Absolutely.
you're getting better as the season goes on. Okay, well then you have the capacity for improvement and rapid improvement or quick turnarounds or whatever. So that's good. Defensively, I think I'm my sense for the G League too is like it is more of a high scoring type of game. There's
Yep.
not a ton of defense being played. You would like that not to necessarily be the case if you're trying to make the NBA anyway. It
Mhm.
doesn't really seem to be an issue in college for some guys, so I don't know why it would be an issue for Jaden Hardy. If you have the tools, why wouldn't you be a better defender? Like he just
Right.
at times just seemed like he didn't care. But again,
Yeah.
like I'll go back, that was sort of a knock on Kuminga. It was a knock on Jalen Green. It's still a knock on Jalen Green. But you
Yeah.
know, I do wonder. So other than just the scoring, because my problem is like, all right, cool, man. You scored 17 points on 17 shots per game in the G League. Congratulations. You ain't getting 17 shots for a while if you're on the Miami
Right.
Heat or in the NBA, like whatever team you're on, probably, right? Like this isn't
Right.
a guy who's getting picked in the top 10. So Do you think he can be an impactful NBA player in a much smaller role?
That's tough to say. It really is. Like right now, the other knock on him, aside from his defense, is his overall judgment. I saw some bad passes and things of that sort. He kind of tends to lose control a little bit as he's trying to make the play. So at least there's the willingness. And again, not having seen like game after game after game and watching it nuance from high school and beyond, it's hard to really get those kind of nuances. But at the same time, like you'd like the decision making to be a little bit better. So he doesn't seem like he's going to be a high level playmaker either. He can be a good playmaker, so that's something else alongside Tyler Herro. He's not that point guard type. He's not like the guy we just talked about. So it's a
Like a
little different.
secondary ball handler, playmaker guy?
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's where I like the comp to Herro. It's like he's not a starter level just yet. Can he be at some point? Sure. Given what Miami's roster is currently comprised of, I wouldn't say that there's a clear role for him in Miami. Something we'll talk about later on in the show as well. But even I just don't see where his other impact can be. Like he doesn't necessarily do anything at an elite level other than be a scorer, and for that he needs to have the ball in his hands. It's just kind of tough to figure out exactly where he'll be drafted, where he'll have the right fit, where he'll be able to showcase those very obvious offensive skills. Like I like his game. It's slow, it's poised, it's got pace. Never gets rattled, very much in control, and yet at the same time, there are moments there where he doesn't seem very effective, and you wonder, can he translate his obvious skill into the NBA level?
Yeah. Look, I'm mixed on Hardy. You've obviously done a lot more work on him than I have. I've seen a little bit of him. I've heard a little bit about him, but to your point, I wonder if it's the right kind of fit, even if he were there at 27. I know that's what we want to get into next.
Yeah, so we will talk about these specific players, what their upside scale will be. That's a little exercise that we came up with a couple of years ago. We're going to incorporate that now as well. And their fit for Miami at 27. Can they make the roster? Can they be an improvement to the current roster? We'll answer all that and more. But first, just a reminder that BetOnline continues to be your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, news and odds, including the NBA Finals, the NHL Finals as well, Major League Baseball, and of course, the latest fighting news from MMA, UFC to boxing. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Just a reminder that you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLOHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show and leave a review. We're going to continue to provide our Blue Notebook scouting reports on various players that could fall to Miami at 27th if they wind up making a selection. As we talked about in yesterday's primer, which you should absolutely go back and check out what Miami would be likely to do with their pick. They're going to be making the selection, whether they keep it as a player that they could potentially add to their roster is one thing, or if they make that selection and then wind up including that pick along with other players on their roster for a potential trade. Who knows? We won't find out until draft night. But for now, let's talk about these specific players. Talk about what we call the upside scale. This is how it breaks out, basically. We've got a player categorized and will be assigning 100% in total. Whether or not they're going to be a fringe player. This is a player that's kind of in and out of the league, going to spend some time in the G League, might wind up getting some spot minutes here and there, but overall just can't really find a place on its roster. Think Gabe Vincent 2 years ago, before they became this player. So it's hard to project 3 or 4 years into the future, but for now, whether or not it seems likely that they'll be a fringe player, assigning a percentage to that. Then their chances of becoming a contributing rotation player. A lot of players fit into that category, but some just you can't really see it. Maybe they're either not that great or just they project to be really, really awesome. And if that's the case, is there any kind of all-star potential? So that's another thing we'll categorize. And then can they become a superstar? Perhaps a lot less likely at 27 than when we first did this for Tyler Herro at 13 a couple of years ago. But either way, I still think there's this potential. There are some guys on this roster that just scream, like even if they're picked in the top 20, late 20s or anything like that, that they could just become great players
in this draft.
I like that. So anyway, go ahead, start off.
No, I mean, the reason we did this too is because this is how front offices break this up. Like this is the kind of thinking that a front office will do in their scouting department. is all right. You've got X pick, in this case 27.
Yep.
What do we want out of this kind of pick? Do we want a high chance as somebody who can be a contributor in our rotation? Are we looking to fill holes in our top 8 or 9? And do we need a
Right.
player who can fill that within the next couple of years? Or are we looking to make a big swing and maybe look for somebody with a little bit more all-star potential or superstar potential, but could also end up being fringe, or in other words, bust out of the league?
Yeah.
And so that's some of the calculus that goes into it. For Kennedy Chandler, I've got him pretty high percentage role player
Hmm.
chances, like night to night rotation kind of guy. I've got him at 65% chance of being a night to night rotation caliber guy.
Okay. Okay.
I love his feel for the game. When you have a couple of elite NBA skills the way that he does, with his acceleration, with his handle, you watch how he communicates on the floor. Also, not just offensively as the point guard, but defensively as well. Those are the kinds of traits that get you on the floor early in your career too. And so, despite the size and all of these things, I think there's a pretty good chance that he ends up at least getting on to the court. I could see him being campaign for the rest of his career, just being a backup
Mm,
point guard for the rest of his career. That's a nice player. That's a useful player to have, right? So I mentioned campaign there. That's not a great comparison for his game. Think more
right.
of like a Reggie Jackson, a Jalen Brunson.
Hmm.
Those are the kind of comps I like for him at that level. I've got him 15% fringe,
Yeah.
15% fringe, and that might be pretty low considering what his size is. And again, I probably would have went much higher on fringe just looking at the box scores and the measurables and all that kind of stuff. But you just watch him play, and it's like, this guy, he's gonna play. Like, I just can't
Yeah.
imagine him not playing in the NBA,
Yeah. I'm
at least
actually
for a few
listening to.
years.
I think that's actually seems a little higher than I would have thought. I would have thought those percentages were a lot lower. Like he's
Yeah,
gonna he projects again in our limited assessment of his game. He projects to be a guy who's going to find a role in the NBA somehow, some way.
yeah.
He's going to be able to contribute. He's just too smart, too aware. The IQ is there, the feel is there, the touch is there. I think he's going to figure it out. Even at 5'11", we've seen players continue to find a way to thrive
I
despite
know.
limitations in size and ability.
50% seems like it's still really short. Like, that's the problem. If guys are just shooting over you every single time down the floor,
That's a
that's the
problem.
problem. Is if
Yeah,
you need to give enough offensively, and there's some things there. Like, his 3-point shooting was not great at Tennessee, even though it was much better in high school. His free throw shooting was down to 60%, and he chalked that up to like just a mental block
no,
in an interview, and that's not a
everybody loves
great
that.
sign.
Yeah,
Like, I'd rather you just lie and tell me it was like a wrist injury or something that you were dealing with all season. But his free throw shooting was much better in high school, so I don't know what to make of that. That's the problem with those one and dones. It's kind of hard with this small
yeah,
sample, but I've got him as a 20% chance as an all star, 0% chance superstar. I'm sorry, when you're 6 feet tall, you're just not going to be superstar. Just not.
yeah.
All star, yeah. You see guys like Darius Garland, who I actually really like for his best case scenario, is a Darius
Right,
Garland type.
right.
Fred Van Vliet, Tyrese Maxey, not an all star now, but kind of on that trajectory.
Yep.
That's the kind of trajectory I think Kennedy Chandler could potentially get on. So I got him as a 20% chance of being an all-star, which I think is a little high, but you look at last year's all-star game, Garland was in it. Fred Van Vliet was in it. Those are small point guards who make the
Yeah,
most of what they got on both ends. And so Garland more so offensively, Van Vliet on both sides. But
absolutely. Yeah.
and like I said, Maxey's on that way. If he projects as a Jalen Brunson, some people think that he's got all-star potential, even though I'm not quite as high on him. But that's where I think if things break right for Kennedy Chandler in his NBA career, right situation, good development, and stays on this path, that's probably where he could end up.
That seems all fair. Like I can't dispute it. Then again, I think you've done the work there. It's a really thorough kind of assessment of who this guy projects to be. I like the All Star possibilities there. Seems a tad high, but I mean, Maxi, even in the comp that you were mentioning, like he was a far better scorer. Like I think he just seemed like a much better scorer at the point guard position than Chandler does. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether or not that works as a comp, but I see what you're saying. Like young guards can be undersized and still find a way to impact NBA games. He just needs to improve defensively. I think that's pretty much the clear
And the
problem
outside
there for him.
shot. And the outside
And the
shot
outside
for
shot.
him is going to be huge. Those are the two things that if you're drafting him, those are your two things that you're pinpointing.
All right.
What about Hardy?
Yeah. For him, I've got a fringe possibility at 30%. A
Yeah,
little
that sounds
high.
about right. That sounds about right.
Uh, it just I've got concerns again, as we talked about before. Like, how is he going to be able to impact the NBA game? How is he going to be able to fit in and change things for the better? How is he going to be able to improve winning on a team? Like, he's going to get picked in the mid to late first round. I don't think he's going to slip out of the first round, despite any issues that we might have with his particular game. And given that they're going to be it's going to be a team that's looking to win, can you just put up those points? Yes, you can. Like, there's a possibility there. We've seen it from Tyler. Like, Tyler's asked to go in there, provide a spark.
Yeah.
We've seen other teams need that kind of spark. But if the shot's not falling, what else is he doing? Then that's the problem. And look, go ahead.
I'm sorry. He reminds me a little bit about like what Cam Thomas was able to give Brooklyn this year.
Yeah.
He's just a bucket getter, goes in,
Yep.
can't really do anything else. You're not really asking him to play make. You just go in these like weird, second
Right.
quarter, third quarter minutes in the middle of December and January. Go get us some buckets.
Yeah. I've got 50% chance of him actually becoming a contributor or rotation
Okay.
type player. I think he's just got, he's got too much on offense that you can pass up. And the body type is there. Like, he's got the physicality. He can handle it, the wingspan, the size. I don't think he's going to have any problem getting his shot off at the NBA level. It's just whether or not he's going to be able to effectively knock it down for consistent periods where he's going to continue to earn playing time. So that's the big concern of him. But if he's out there, he's going to look to get his shot going. Some nights it's going to fall, some nights it won't. But either way, I think he'll still be at least a 50-50 chance of being a rotation player. Now, given all that, can he get hot? Can he become a great offensive player? Can he go on the same path that we're talking about for some of these other all-star level guards or guards that are just shy of all-star level? Tyler Herro certainly had a lot of consideration as an all-star based on everything that we saw for the first half of the season. I think he merited that same kind of consideration. And given the comp that I'd like as far as Herro, I think there's a 20% chance of him becoming at one point a potential all-star. If he finds the right situation, if he finds consistency, if the physical tools and the same kind of growth that we actually saw in his one season with the G League translates into the NBA level, there's that potential for all-star caliber player. It just seems a little unlikely. Having said that, I don't think he's going to be a superstar. I don't even know that I'd qualify Bradley Beal as a superstar so much as it's just a super scorer. And maybe a lot of people will shake their heads at that assessment. But
superstar, we're talking about like one of like a guy who you could put on a team and can lead you to a championship. And Beal is an all-star, multi-time perennial all-star caliber guy. But he's not like Giannis. He's not Durant. He's not LeBron. He's not Steph. Yeah, that's the superstar. So you have 0% superstar part.
chance.
Yeah, so we're on the same page there. All right, let's say both of these guys are on the board at 27 for the Heat. Who would you prefer that they if you're picking for the Heat, who would you take between these two guys?
Man, that's kind of putting me on the spot. At the same time, it's like you look. It all depends on what they're planning on doing with this roster. And even at the point that we made in yesterday's episode, again, Miami has never shied away from picking a guy, even if there's a glut at that particular position, because they'll either stash you and you'll just continue to have to do the work where you can potentially earn playing time, or you know what, we're just going to wind up trading you at some point for another player that's going to be better than you. So I think the more NBA ready player right now happens to be Chandler. I also just like the pure scoring ability of a guy like Hardy, and given that that you're looking at potentially moving, Victor Oladipo leaves in free agency, or that Tyler Herro might be a trade piece. You want to have guys off the bench that can come in and get buckets. Hardy's that guy. Like, you don't ever have to worry about that. He's going to come in and try to get points, and you need that on occasion. He's not necessarily the elite athlete that a lot of people are looking for as far as an improvement to the NBA roster or the Heat roster, but I think he's going to be a bucket getter. And considering what Miami's problems were in the playoffs about having a secondary scorer alongside Jimmy, I don't think he necessarily projects as that, but he's certainly going to be able to help in some regards. You're not going to have to worry about him finding a way to get a bucket.
Yeah, I've got no argument with that. I'm gonna go Kennedy Chandler if I had to pick between the two. Look, Kyle Lowry is getting older. You're not super psyched about that contract and what he's gonna give you next year based on the season he just had. And Gabe Vincent, we all like Gabe Vincent, but he's only got a year left on this contract, and you don't know if you're gonna be able to bring him back. This is getting to be a really expensive roster, especially if you keep and extend Tyler Herro, and that extension kicks in next season. So you've got some planning to do in regard to your point guard spot. And could you imagine Kennedy Chandler learning under Kyle Lowry? We saw what a guy like Gabe Vincent, who wasn't even a point guard coming into the NBA, could learn under Kyle Lowry. What Kennedy Chandler could do, a natural, traditional type of point guard, what he could learn under Kyle Lowry, sign me up for that. I would take Kenny Chandler. Also, I'm just so much more convinced that Kenny Chandler is going to be an NBA player as opposed to Hardy. And that, to me, at this point in the draft, matters so much. Hardy could maybe theoretically give you some things you need, but I'm not convinced that he's going to stick. Where with Kennedy Chandler, I feel really good that he's going to play some sort of role going forward. And if you give him a mentor like Lowry, I like his chances of hitting his upside, his max upside, quite a bit. So I would take Kennedy Chandler if he was there at 27 between these two guys.
As we continue to go deeper and deeper into this exercise, we'll eventually have our Locked On Heat big board for players.
Yeah.
I would say that Chandler probably tops Hardy, just because I am a believer in his game as well, and I like what Hardy can do. But I hear your points, and I know how the Heat front office tends to operate. I would say that they'd rather get the guy who can be a more long-term, impactful, positively impactful player than the guy that's a risk. I don't think they've got enough information on Hardy where they can take that kind of risk the way they did on Tyler Herro. Like they're much more of a believer in Calipari and the Kentucky system and everything else like that. So that even if a player has questions like Tyler did as he was entering the draft after 1 year, they were convinced that he was going to be able to take the work ethic and be able to translate to the next level. Not a knock on Hardy and his work ethic. As I've said before, he continues to improve. But I just think that they're more of a. I would guess that they're more of a believer in a Chandler type player at this point. But that's where we wrap up. We'll wrap up our episode here, our first of many Blue Notebook episodes regarding the potential NBA draft and where players will fit in, scouting them and giving you details on them. So if you have any questions, concerns, comments, please leave those in the YouTube section, or you can always reach us via email, etc. Thank you so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure to go check out the Locked On NBA Big Board. That'll be another board where both of these players will be. Host Rafael Barlow from the NBA Draft Junkies and the author of the NBA Big Board newsletter will be joined by Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Leif Thulin, giving fans an in-depth look into the NBA draft. You get mock draft, you get player rankings, and of course you get big boards too. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks so much for joining me, Wes.
Wrap it up, B.